Hi, my name's Caroline. I'm a Humanistic Integrative Counsellor, and I've jumped on today to do a quick video for you about a golden rule for sustaining relationships, romantic relationships and friendships. And so I've already done one in this series, but this is another really important part of the picture, and this golden rule is eye contact. So when I was a therapist in training, one of the very first parts to the training is to get you to learn how to sustain prolonged eye contact with other people, because this can be really this can feel quite disconcerting if you're someone who doesn't find eye contact easy, because it's a way of showing vulnerability between two people. So in sort of body language terms, if you're not able to retain eye contact with either your partner or your friend, there's a subconscious message there which is being transferred between the two of you, that one or the other is maybe hiding something, or is not able to be vulnerable with the other person, or that the other person is just not important enough for you to make them a priority. Now, that might not actually be the truth. That might not be the reality of the situation. It might be that you just got a massive to-do list, and you don't really want to put down your phone in order to engage in the conversation. You may be very distracted with other things that have been going on, and so you might feel like, oh no, I've got to do this thing, I've got to do the washing up before I can look at you or talk to you, and especially in today's very fast-paced life that we all lead, we've got endless to-do lists, endless things to be done, and if you have a big family, that it may feel as though there's constant pulls on your time, but actually being able to give your partner or your friend or people who you care about, being able to give them eye contact is one of the greatest gifts that you can share with someone. And the age-old saying, the eyes are the window to the soul. And so this is how trust is built up between two people, because it's very hard to trust someone who won't look you in the eye. And that might be, they may not be able to look you in the eye because they have social anxiety, or if they've had, they maybe just need a bit of time and space. They may find eye contact too intrusive, and it's not always the time and the place to give sort of full-on eye contact. And even the idea of eye contact, this isn't sort of, I'm not saying, have a sort of staring competition, because eye contact, if it's too prolonged, might feel too intense and too intrusive. But this is about being able to feel safe that your partner or your friend or the person you care about is prepared to put down what they're doing or finish what they're doing and then make time for you. It's about feeling safe with that person, and the way we feel safe is by feeling seen. So this idea comes from it comes from various different theories, but one of the big theories around this is attachment theory. And this stems from the idea that when you are very little, so a baby, you, in order to survive, to survive physically, you need to get your caregiver, you know, usually a parent, you have to get their attention. And so there's lots of different ways that babies manage to get our attention. But one of the ways they're designed to get our attention is by looking super cute. So, you know, they have big eyes in, you know, relative to the size of their head. And that is so that we as parents feel protective towards them, and we are more likely to look at them. And as long as we are looking at them, we are then more likely to take care of them. And so if you were a child growing up and perhaps your parents were super busy, or if there were any kind of difficulties in your family, so perhaps your mum had postnatal depression, or if there was sort of really big financial issues, you know, perhaps there was redundancy, if there are any kind of death or in the family, or addictions, or any kind of violence or abuse, then it might be that as a child you didn't really get noticed very much, or you might get noticed but maybe your needs weren't really met by your parents. And so that can, as we get older, that can leave us feeling unsafe, and we can have this view of the world that it's very, very hard to get my needs met because my needs weren't met as a child. And as adults, our nervous system, that's wired up into our brain, and our subconscious will equate eye contact with survival, even though logically we know that we don't have to have another person's eye contact in order for us to stay alive. But when we are in a very, very close relationship or friendship, particularly if that other person is our main attachment person, so if you're in a romantic relationship, then that would be your other half. If you are single, then that might be you know, a sister, or a parent, or a good friend. If we don't feel seen on a very physical level, like literally seen by that special person, then our nervous system can feel very, very unsafe, because we may feel as though metaphorically we are not going to survive, and this can send our nervous system into feelings of anxiety or feelings of depression if it happens consistently over time. So in particular with a romantic relationship, if we have got into the habit of, you know, your partner comes home, but let's say you're in the middle of I don't know, cooking, or doing the washing up, or doing the ironing, if we get into the habit of, you know, saying hi but just carrying on with what I'm doing, over time this can cause an erosion in the relationship, because you know, maybe one or the other might feel as though they don't count, they're not important, they're not noticed. Obviously if it happens, you know, occasionally, I'm not talking about the odd time here, I'm talking about a consistent sort of not noticing of the other person. And you know, we can all be guilty of this, and you know, sometimes there's something really fascinating on our phone that we really want to finish doing or watching, but when we look back at some of the studies and some of the research, there were studies done in orphanages showing that babies in orphanages were dying not through malnutrition, not through lack of food or drink, but babies who don't get eye contact, don't get cuddled, don't get affection and attention put on them, will not thrive and might die, because as human beings we are wired up to be social creatures. Our brains aren't that different from when we used to live in caves together in tribes, and so evolutionarily it was vital for us to be within the tribe in order to survive, because we all sort of lived in a communal space and we all helped each other out, and we very much relied on eye contact, and on it's not even just the eye contact, it's on noticing the other people in the tribe's body language. And as a child, if your parent or caregiver wasn't noticing you, you would have then had to create coping strategies in order to either get their attention somehow in other manners, or you would most likely end up switching off a lot of your emotions in order to try to become self-sustaining and to convince yourself that actually I don't need anyone, because no one's ever going to come and, you know, meet my needs anyway. It's not always those extremes, but so at the other end of the spectrum, it might be that, for example, you start to use very aggressive or sort of loud behaviour in order to get your parent or caregiver's attention. Again, these are survival strategies that we may have, you know, our subconscious has figured out, well, I'm not going to get attention just for existing, I've got to find another way. So are you noticing, are you feeling unseen by your partner, or by, you know, your best friend, or I don't know, your sister, your mum? Because this is a really, it can be a really slippery slope, even the best relationship, if lack of eye contact starts to creep in, it can eventually over time erode that relationship. If you do end up sort of an evening, you know, one's watching TV, the other one's on their phone, or like I said before, if, you know, someone comes in, the other one just ignores them and keeps doing what they're doing, and this is something that I see a lot in my clients. It's something I've experienced myself, and it can be really hard to understand sort of what's at the bottom of this, what's at the root of this, because, you know, in theory it's very socially acceptable, isn't it, to, you know, sit on your phone, and even if your other half is trying to have a conversation with you, to just sort of be staring at your phone or sort of giving one word answers. And that can, even if the other person who's trying to have the conversation, let's say, even if they might feel sort of quite rejected and abandoned by this lack of eye contact, it's quite hard to put your finger on, to then sort of say, oh, you know, I feel like I just don't feel, this doesn't feel right. I'm just not feeling great about this. But the mobile phone is a barrier, in the same way as any kind of substance addiction can be a barrier, in the same way that if we've learned as a coping strategy when we were younger, if we learnt to shut down our emotions, we can then go into a very sort of shut down mental and emotional state, and that means it'd be quite difficult for us to connect with our partner on a mental or emotional level. So that's a barrier as well. There's lots of ways that we can there can be barriers created in between people. I mean, in like body language terms, just closing your eyes is a form of barriering. If you're, for example, in an interview or any kind of conversation, interrogation, if the person you're talking to is closing their eyes, it might indicate that there's something they don't want to face, or that they're feeling very vulnerable in that situation and just can't allow themselves to be they can't allow themselves to be in the present moment talking to you. And that can feel, for the person talking, that can feel as though you're being pushed away, not physically of course, but emotionally pushed away. And the same with lack of eye contact. Now, I know for people who've been diagnosed with, or who believe that they might be on the ADHD spectrum, eye contact can be particularly difficult. I mean, eye contact can be particularly difficult for people with social anxiety as well. So there's lots of other reasons why eye contact might be difficult for you. And this is not a way of saying, of trying to shame people who find eye contact hard. But it's if you're not on the ADHD spectrum, if you don't have social anxiety, so this is perhaps just more like a habitual kind of pattern that you've fallen into, then I definitely encourage sort of starting to think about that and finding ways in which to try to break out of that cycle, in order to bring yourselves back together, in order to allow yourselves to be vulnerable again. So what could help in this scenario? So one thing you could do is try just being really vulnerable with your partner. If your partner is a safe person generally, if you trust them and you know that they will listen to you if you are being vulnerable, if you've in the past, if you've been able to state your emotions and that's felt like a comfortable place to be for both of you, then you could just try being super vulnerable with them and just and owning your feelings around the lack of eye contact, and saying, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling anxious. How would it be, is it all right to have a chat? Like, would you mind putting your phone down, or can we have a chat after dinner with no mobile phones around? So in that way, you've owned your feelings. It's the trap here is often that we can feel rejected by the other person and then feel angry towards them because they're not giving us the eye contact that we'd like. And the temptation might be, I'm really pissed off with you because of what you can't ever put your phone down. You're glued to your screen, you've got an addiction, and this sort of language is really tempting to go down that rabbit hole. But actually, when we think about it perhaps a bit deeper, we could actually take ownership for how we're feeling, and that's the ideal way of being able to bridge the situation, by taking ownership of how we feel when we don't get eye contact. and then inviting the other person to, you know, in couples therapy it's called a future focused request. So I feel stressed when I'm trying to talk to you and you are not looking at me and you're on your phone. Would it be okay if after dinner we have a chat and leave our phones in the kitchen? That would be a future focused request. You're not projecting any of your feelings onto your partner. You're just making a really simple request. You're validating yourself by acknowledging your own feelings, and you're able to express your needs to your partner. If your partner then says no, then that's a whole different ball game. Or if your partner then isn't prepared to meet you halfway, then you know that's something that perhaps might need looking at, maybe in couples therapy, or certainly something for the two of you to address together. Other sort of solutions, just very practical sort of ideas, might be very simple things like when you're having dinner, not having your phones at the dinner table. You know, maybe try having one night a week with no screens, or limited screen time. You know, if you're having conversations, you know, make sure your phones are at least face down, notifications switched off, that sort of thing. If eye contact is really tricky for you or your friend or partner, then perhaps something like carving out time to have some of these conversations, you know, the deeper conversations that you'd like to have with them. But maybe suggesting going for a walk so you're not facing each other, you're sort of adjacent to each other, and in that way you're perhaps more likely to be able to talk about things you want to talk about, without the if you find eye contact intimidating, then that might be a way forward. Same as going for drives, you know, chatting whilst driving, or even just sitting in the car, or sitting on a bench in a park, sort of with a nice scene in front of you, and having some, you know, having chats, but not having to do the eye contact if it does feel too intense, but perhaps also being aware that, you know, maybe that is a tricky area in your relationship. If eye contact is difficult all the time, you know, what can you do as a couple or as a friendship to make each other feel loved, seen, heard, that doesn't involve eye contact? So that might be something that takes a bit of looking at, a bit of thought process, and then, you know, the usual sort of advice that you probably would get from a couples counsellor would be things like, you know, really carving out time for each other, making space for date nights, or you know, if it's friendship, if it's to do with the friendship, then yeah, just making the time and the space to go and do stuff in person, not just through WhatsApp messages or Instagram reels or sharing TikTok videos or whatever it is you do, but actually being physically in the same space together if you can, or if not, phone calls, or video calls. So, you know, you're still staring at your screen, but you're staring at it, you know, you're looking at each other. And then one of the suggestions that couples counsellors might suggest for you is the idea that when if you're in a partnership and one of you is out at work, or both of you are out at work, it's a bit different these days, post-pandemic, lots of people work from home. So, and that's a whole different video. But certainly if either of you are, it doesn't have to be that you go out for work, it can be you go out, you know, to look after your children or to take your elderly relatives out. But, you know, the idea is that when you go off and when you come back, those are the moments for reconnection, and both of you being on board with making those reconnection moments sacred. And I'm not saying that in a religious way, I'm saying that in a very sort of place of compassion for each other. So the idea that, you know, when you're moving away from each other, so when either one of you goes out to work or volunteering or whatever it is you do, you know, there is a ritual that you go through and you try to keep it consistent. And that might be as simple as a kiss or a I love you or a whatever it is. But as part of that, making sure there is eye contact between the two of you in order to re-establish that connection that you have before you both go your separate ways. And then when you both come back together, whether whoever it is that's coming in or coming out of the house or wherever it is you live, again, making sure that there is, and it only has to take moments, but committing to the practice and the spirit of reconnecting. And so wherever possible, whatever it is you're doing, obviously it's not always possible. Of course it's not always possible to completely abandon whatever it is you're doing, but most of the time you're probably not doing something that's so important that you can't take 2 minutes to, you know, go and say hi to your partner or greet your friend, you know, when she comes in. And again, just making sure that that moment of reconnection is in place. Again, with eye contact, maybe physical touch if that's what you want to do, but just acknowledging that the other person in your partnership exists, and just that practice, that regular practice, can really help couples that have derailed, where everything's not quite, you know, you just don't feel like you're on the same page anymore. Because what's going on when you're in a partnership is you're there for each other. And if it feels as though one person's putting in more effort than the other, or one person, or if you've both sort of lost contact in terms of eye contact, affection, interest, you know, and there's loads of good reasons why that might happen, you know, especially if you've got young children or aging relatives, or you're massively stressed, or, you know, one or both of you has mental health issues. Lots and lots of reasons why that might be the case. But putting those habits in might feel awkward to begin with, but if you can try and just push through the initial sort of, oh, this feels really weird, if you can push through it, it takes moments in your day in order to try to re-establish that connection. So yeah, I hope that's been interesting or helpful, or both. If you have enjoyed my video, I'd appreciate you giving me a like and a subscribe, but if not, that's also fine too. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Take care, bye.